Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Billboard, where we're talking about brand marketing, out of home advertising, and probably a lot of other things that marketers think about on a daily basis. My name is Charlie Riley. I'm the head of marketing at OneScreen, who powers this podcast. I'm joined by my co host, the chief commercial officer and the co founder of OneScreen, Greg Wise. And we're joined by a special guest, the senior vice president of marketing and growth at Pavilion. If you're listening to this, you're probably already familiar with Pavilion. If you're not, it's the preemptive community for, and does more than community education. It's an incredible, the events are incredible. Over 10,000 GTM executives are part of it. And I've been very fortunate to learn and just meet a lot of great people at it. Kathleen can talk more about it, but we're thrilled to have Kathleen join us to talk about all things marketing and some great ideas about ambush marketing. But Kathleen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be on the show, and this is a topic I love talking about. So can't wait to dig in.
Yeah, you gave us some great stories that we can jump into, but can you give everyone maybe a little bit of background of your story? You've led agencies, you're working now at Pavilion and done a number of other things, but if you can give your background, that'd be great.
It's a funny background. I actually, before I went into marketing, I spent 10 years working in international development consulting. So I did a lot of work with what was then USAID and the World Bank on water systems in the developing world. What does that have to do with marketing, you
Hmm.
ask? I actually had done two graduate degrees. One was in international politics, the other was an MBA in marketing, and spent the first part of my career on the politics side. But halfway through that, I started seeing like a lot of these projects would get derailed because of bad communication. And so partway through that career, I began to shift my focus on like, how do you actually build consensus for big public sector reform projects? And how do you use marketing skills to do it? And that led me back into marketing. And so, in a long time ago, I will not name the year, my husband and I decided to start a marketing agency and kind of start over like mid career. And we built that agency. We were very early HubSpot partners. And so we were early buying into this notion of like inbound marketing when that was very novel. We grew the agency, went from being a local agency in the Mid Atlantic to a national agency. We actually won HubSpot's first ever Client Campaign of the Year award. Fun fact. We sold that agency in 2017, and I went on to pursue my goal of working in-house in B2B tech. And so really since then, that's what I've been doing. I'm an early stage person at heart, probably because I was an entrepreneur for 11 years. I had that agency, I had another startup. I was a CEO and founder. I think once you have that DNA, you never lose it. And
Yep.
so that's part of why I like that like early and growth stage of company. And that's what led me to Pavilion. I joined as a member in 2019 because I was working as a head of marketing in a lot of VC backed, like Series A to B stage companies, which it's a lot of pressure, a lot of challenges. You're many times learning on the job because there isn't really a great playbook for these roles. And I found Pavilion and it felt like this answer to the problem that I didn't even really realize I had. And then 2 years later, I had the opportunity to join the company as the head of marketing. And it's been fantastic because it's very rare as a marketer that you actually get to lead marketing for a company where you've deeply experienced the product as a customer and you are the ICP. And so the combination of those two things, like I am marketing to people just like me, and also it has been something that has been transformative for me in my career, have made it really just honestly an honor and a privilege to be the person who gets to evangelize for what Pavilion does.
There's a lot of commonalities there, I think, especially for you two, having you've come from different paths, but found marketing and as founders, that entrepreneurial spirit that you both have. I think there's a lot of commonalities there. But my commonality to that background, which is incredible, is the same thing. Like we sell out of home advertising to marketers, and I've sat in that seat before. So it's helpful, and Pavilion's been great. CMO school, can't say enough great things about it. You are lonely sometimes and you do need someone, a checks and balance. And so when you are learning on the job, it is helpful to be able to sell or evangelize what you know. And so it's been fun to sell to marketers.
Yeah, Kathleen, I think it's so first of all, I guess founder to founder, kudos. It's really not for the faint of heart. It's a tough ride, but you're at the forefront of marketing, right? You're talking to marketers every single day. We ask this to really all of our guests. What are you seeing out there in the market with marketers? Whether it's trends, biggest challenges that they're facing, what are you hearing?
I'm hearing a ton of anxiety and burnout just across the board. It's like marketers are crying out for understanding and help. And
Yep.
I think there's a number of factors at play. I think there's this huge divide within the world of go to market around brand and demand. And some of this is fueled by the fact that, certainly with Pavilion, a lot of the operators we work with come from companies that are VC or PE backed, and there's tremendous pressure for growth and to hit really aggressive targets generally. And a lot of that pressure and the way that that orients your company and your focus can lead to short termism, which then puts a lot of pressure on your demand gen engine to carry the bulk of the responsibility within marketing. And I think what marketers are seeing is that while that does drive short term results, it kind of creates a dependency, right? Like you're not building a strong foundation when all you're focused on is the short term stuff. And I think marketers realize inherently that the long term is crucial. The brand aspects are crucial.
Hmm.
And what's funny is that this is all coming around now. And what felt like brand being a long term investment is actually now proving out to also be a short term investment. Because if you're keeping up with what's happening, for example, with LLMs and generative search optimization, what we're starting to learn is that how even now Google, but also certainly the LLMs are deciding what content to surface. A lot of it is based on the number of brand searches. And so they're using brand search as a proxy for trustworthiness and credibility and then surfacing content. And so the way even SEO is done is changing, and it's more reliant on brand investment. But we're living through a generation of marketers right now that have had to index so heavily into demand gen that we're forced to play catch up. And it's not that we didn't believe in brand, it's that we were held back from investing in it the way that we knew we should. And I think a lot of marketers work for companies where they feel that brand is underappreciated and therefore underinvested. And so there's this clarion call at the moment in the market for, hey, we need to reclaim what it means to be a marketer. And that is more than just demand generation. And we have to start pushing back.
There's so much there that I want to get into because everything you just said resonates so much with what Charlie and I talk about on a daily basis, with what I'm hearing from marketers. I think that is so well said. So a lot of the marketers that you're talking about didn't necessarily have to focus on brand over the past decade. So like I bucket this out in that 2010 to 2020 marketing or go to marketing playbook, right? It was very unit economic driven, and there was a formula of putting a certain amount of dollars into the digital marketing machine and getting a certain dollar value out. But that's shifted. Marketers realize that, but I feel you nailed it. I think it's the C suite and the investors that have not gotten there yet, and it is that pressure of short term ROI that is not really in balance with what and how marketing works today. Marketing has just fundamentally changed. Look, we're a VC backed company. So this is coming from a place of, I get it. Charlie is our head of marketing. We live and talk about this all day, board meetings, right? How do you balance profitability with growth and generating leads for your sales team? But like marketing has changed, and brand now a big topic of conversation. And a lot of marketers, from my perspective, don't really fully understand brand because they never had to,
Yeah.
right? It was a decade of we never had to look at it. Brand and buzz was like this fluffy thing, couldn't really measure it, but we didn't have to do it. And now kind of do. But marketers seem to understand they need to go that way. It's how do we convince these other people, like the investors? Like what is the chasm we have to cross here? What is it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I would say I don't know if I would say that's that marketers don't know how to do brand or don't know what it is. I do think that if you ask marketers, you will hear some say that like marketing has become a profession of not just marketers, just like many professions. Like there are
Yeah.
people who were heads of sales who are now heads of marketing, who were engineers who've gone on to be marketers. And by the way, many of those people bring really important and fresh perspectives. So I'm not here to say they shouldn't be, but I think there's like a difference between a marketer who has been classically educated in marketing and who understands all the different facets of what marketing is supposed to do, and somebody who's grown up in a B2B tech company, for example, and only knows what they've experienced, which to your point, in the last decade or so is very leveraged on demand generation. And so you have this interesting divide in terms of the types of marketing leaders out there, the ones that have grown up in the system and are just replicating what they know, and those who came out of a more classic educational background and are like railing against what they see as this diversion in the meaning of what it is to be a marketer. So how do we convince? I think like with anything, the convincing is going to come in a couple ways. Number one, data is what speaks to
Yep.
CEOs and CFOs. Now, data around brand can be challenging. It's not impossible, but certainly can be challenging. I think some of it is data like out there in the market. Some of it is proof in the pudding. Like you have to build enough trust within your company to earn the right to do some experiments with brand, and then you got to make them work, right? You got to prove out that they have an impact. And there's a little bit of that. If the proof is in the pudding, we'll start putting more money into it. But there are also plenty of companies out there that have invested in brand that have shown very powerfully the results they can drive. Like I would say, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but a great example of one is 6sense. Here's a company that's like an intent data provider, right? And there's a lot of them out there. It's a competitive space, but 6sense invested really early on in building a community, actually a couple communities. They have their own community, and then they have the CMO Coffee Talk community. And then they also invest in events. They have something called Empowered CMO, where they do these like very elevated events for female CMOs. These are arguably all brand investments, and they have driven tremendous loyalty within the market because of the way they've done this. And these are long plays. And I remember speaking to Latney Canant, who's now their CRO, who was their CMO at the time.
Mhm.
And I remember her saying, I always tell my VCs, don't take away my brand investment. That was a must have for her. And she was successful in advocating for it. And I give her a lot of credit for that because it's really paid off and it's differentiated them in what is a very crowded market.
They're a great example, and they've done. You're right, like that investment. I think the categorization of what each execution or campaign or program is, maybe that's changed a little bit. And I think you brought up a really good example about where a marketer came from, because if they did come from an engineering background, they may have moved more into demand gen roles. So like their focus or their strong suit is going to be different than maybe a T-shaped marketer who's led every function and can snorkel across all, but then they deep dive into other ones. I think it depends on where you've come up through the ranks. You have a different viewpoint than probably most people we would talk to, because you talk to marketers every day, but you are also talking to CROs, you're talking to sales leaders, CEOs. We talked about, like you mentioned, earning the right to do brand campaigns. Do you think that's changing from a marketer standpoint right now? If they had the viewpoint that you have with all the rest of the C suite, do you think that their opinions are changing about brand given everything we just talked about for the last 15 minutes? Or is it still, sure, yeah, but at the end of the day, we have quarterly numbers, and is it changing, or are we still have a long way to go?
So first of all, I just need to say some people out there are going to take a lot of offense at my phrasing of you have to earn the right to spend on brand. They're going to be like, you don't have to earn that. You should just have that. And while that might be true, while we should just have that, the reality is that that's not what's happening.
Right.
So let's just call it a spade. Don't hate the player, hate the game. So that's not what's happening. And that's why I phrase it that way, because I am not here to spend a lot of time on what should be. I'm here, like Pavilion's mission is to help operators be successful in the environment that exists. Like we have to acknowledge reality. So I do think it's changing. I think it's going to change really slowly. I think there's a lot of talk out there right now about the importance of brand, and I think that is helping to raise awareness. I also think with all these changes that are coming with AI, that I think people would be foolish not to see that brand is like a massive moat at a time of AI, because look, it also depends how you define brand. And there's a lot of discussion around this. But for example, I just got an interesting email from Pep Laya, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for at Winter. And he was also
Mhm.
the founder of CXL. And he talked about, in his mind, brand is anything that is not a performance channel. So when he talks about measuring brand, if it's a performance channel, it's not brand. If it's a non-performance channel, it is. And it's just a very kind of like nice, very simple way of thinking about it. You may or may not agree with that regardless. But if that's the case, like the point here is that AI is making all the performance channels easier, which feels great in the short term. But like everything, I don't remember who said it once, but like marketers ruin everything. And anytime you give us technology to make it easier, we're going to abuse it, right? And we're going to flood the zone and make the channel less effective. And so I think it's actually Kip Bodnar from HubSpot who talks a lot about the power of arbitrage as a marketer. Like you as a marketer need to lean into those areas that everybody else isn't oversaturating and exploiting, because that's where you're going to get the lower CAC opportunities to acquire customers. And so right now, we're still at the point where you can use AI for arbitrage, but that's quickly going to disappear because it's going to become so commonplace. And so it's going to be more table stakes, much like back in the day, inbound marketing was like a real differentiator and then it became table stakes. And so we always have to be thinking about what's that next thing as marketers. And right now, the next thing is brand. This is where, and here's the crazy part, is that it's not like you can turn it on like that. If you think that brand is going to be that arbitrage opportunity in a year, you need to be investing in it now because it takes time to build brand equity. And so I strongly believe that the companies that are going to succeed coming out of this AI boom are the ones that right now are investing in brand. And there are people that see that. And I think investors are starting to see it. But here's the thing, like, if we're being honest, it means you still have to be amazing at demand gen, right? Like you
Mhm.
can't, one does not replace the other. So you have to have best in class demand gen, and then you have to be able to layer onto that brand.
That was great.
Yeah.
It was great because I was in the inbound or on that sort of like the upswing, if you will, because I spent the majority of my early career at HubSpot. And what's interesting about even just the juxtaposition between what I was doing there and what I do now, I effectively sell billboards. It is outbound, right? But billboards and out of home are bucketed under the brand profile, really. And in 2020, my co founders got together. The hypothesis was that brand was next. And at the time, there were a lot more headwinds. And now those headwinds have really shifted to being more tailwinds. Now, brand comes in many shapes and sizes. You nailed it. And out of home is one of those. And now we're starting to see the smart, I guess they're progressive at this point, brands, high tech, high growth tech startups, emerging D2C brands, your digitally native brands, your e commerce companies. They're investing in the real world, in real world advertising from the get go, from the jump. Brand is important from the first funding announcement, right? And then a continuation. So I think it's going to take time. I think there might be some hurt in between where some of these companies are going to realize that the demand gen only approach, the short term ROI approach, won't work. And it might be really hurtful to some of these companies. We might see some of these companies potentially not survive past that
And
point.
expensive, like the CAC
And
on a
expensive.
demand gen only approach is going to be higher.
I don't get where you're going with some of those unit economics because I haven't talked to one marketer. Look, a lot of the folks we talk to are Pavilion members, for example. And I can't name one who says that demand gen only approach is working and the numbers and everything looks beautiful. I can't think of one in the past 2 years. So something's got to give.
What we do is similar to what Kip probably talked about in the sense of you zig when others zag. And we have seen some brands use out of home for big announcements to stand out. We've seen them, no one else in their space is trying it. They're doing the same playbook, and this allows us to look different. So, yeah, I think we agree with everything you've just said and what Kip said, especially when you do the math and you can find lower customer acquisition costs with some of those executions. Switching over to out of home, because you gave some interesting examples around how you've used it and maybe under the term ambush marketing or guerrilla marketing, but Greg likes to tell everybody that what counts as out of home, and I think your example we would firmly put under the out of home camp. But tell us your example of how you used an out of home execution when you were trying to be scrappy and figure out how to make an impact. Tell people how you've thought about and how you executed your own out of home campaign.
As I said, I've always been a startup marketer at heart. And so by definition, that usually means I don't have a big marketing budget.
Yep.
So I have to get creative, like really creative. So when I owned my agency and I had this second startup, I was like, I don't really have a marketing budget for this startup. What can I do that doesn't cost almost anything? And we were HubSpot partners at the time. We had been going to inbound since the beginning, right? I knew the conference intimately. I think this was probably I'm going to guess like around 2015. And we were at the point where we were ready to announce this new business called the Inbound Sales Academy, which was an online sales training company. So what we did was we printed branded urinal screens, and the slogan on them, it had our logo right in the middle. And if you don't know what a urinal screen is, it's like the target that gets put into a urinal, basically. And the slogan was, "Are you pissed at the quality of your inbound leads?" Because that's what we were designed to solve. It was like, we'll help you learn how to close them better. And we got to inbound, and the whole goal was to get them in every men's bathroom in the Boston Convention Center, which is huge. It's a huge convention
Mhm.
center. And most companies like that have a presence at inbound pay a lot of money to sponsor it. And we were definitely going rogue. And I'm sure that the inbound folks probably don't love that we did this. But so we were like, how are we going to get it in there? And we actually approached I don't think this person works there anymore, so I can out them now. The guy that was the concierge at the Westin Hotel, which is connected to the convention center. And we were like, hey, do you have some friends that want to make some money? We will pay you and you can pay them to go stick these urinal screens in every single men's urinal in the entire convention center. And you have to do it like so that it's right before the conference starts. And he did. And it got a lot of buzz. So we attended the conference that year, and we had a speaker, and I'm trying to remember who it was because it's a marketing influencer who's pretty famous, who from the stage was like, "What's the deal with the Inbound Sales Academy? I was just in the bathroom." Like, people were saying things about it. And as a company that we probably spent a few $100s to print these things, and then another like 50 to $100 to get the guy to put them in the bathrooms. Like, it was huge. The impact that it made was very outsized compared to the investment. And that's the kind of thing that I love. And for years, I've wanted to experiment with things like sidewalk graffiti, which is when people use like power washers to actually, because a lot of graffiti is obviously illegal, but if you're using a power washer to clean the
Clean it.
sidewalk in the pattern of a saying or a logo, that's not illegal. I've also always wanted to use projection art, which is when you get a projector and you project light onto the side of a building. And I've always thought, what a cool thing to do. I used to be in cyber, and I wanted to do it on the side of the Moscone Center for RSA, like completely guerrilla, put like some small company logo on there. And I'm sure you could get taken down, and there's definitely legal risk. Like, it's a gray area, but how fun. This is the kind of thing that like Salesforce did way, way back in the day when they were disrupting the CRM space. And I know there's some other great stories of guerrilla marketing that are really fun to think about. But just out of home in general, I think is really interesting because it's always been seen as the domain of big companies. And I don't really see it that way. I think you can be very selective and do it creatively. And I think it works. Like, I literally was in New York City on Monday, took the subway from Penn Station to my hotel, and the entire left side of the car that I was facing, every piece of out of home was Beehive, the newsletter platform,
Yep.
which I'm familiar with Beehive. And I was like, wow, they like took over the whole train car. It was noticeable. And there's lots of examples I've seen, like ClickUp do this in airports, and there's tons of ways to do it, whether it's like mobile billboards or, Charlie, you and I talked about like wrapping pedicabs to ferry people from conferences to happy hours. There are big ways of doing it, like buying the billboard on the 101 outside of San Francisco, which is the tech you've made it when thing, all the way down to, hey, we just have a branded pedicab that's going to drive you back and forth, that are much more affordable. So I hate the fact that more B2B marketers haven't done this, because I think it's like easily accessible and creative and a really great way to stand out.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Out of home it's different, bold, and big or small. It's the like we're here moment. It's also the only channel that gives you the ability to leverage audience plus context and moments and like in reference, right? Because what you just talked about is a very specific, great use case. It's a point of interest where you know your target ICP is going to be under one roof at a given period of time. That's that moment, and then you use context. You used context relative to the creative, and it's brilliant. And it really is. And that's why out of home, big or small, can be so incredibly impactful. And by the way, you've nailed it too, which is you don't have to buy the billboard on the 101. Part of, and not to make this about us, but part of what we wanted to do was democratize this for all marketers, if you will, right? It's a lot of the marketers we've been talking about up to this point, which is the folks that have never done it before. It's the folks that have shied away from it. It's the folks that never in a million years would go buy a billboard that now are looking to go do it for one reason or another. They've gotten the brand buy-in or whatever it is. They don't know how,
Yeah.
because like it isn't hard, but it also isn't easy, right? It's super fragmented market. You just talked about 3 or 4 different format types. And that doesn't even include some of the traditional format types, like a billboard, like a bus shelter, like airport ads. We did our own inbound takeover 2022, and we spent about the 70K, and we bought wrapped rideshare vehicles. We did LED truck, static truck. We did walking billboards. We did projections at night. There are so many different things you can do
Yeah.
with out of home. It's unbelievable, but you don't really have to spend that much. You certainly can, and it's all relative to business objective. If you want to dominate and take over a market and you have hundreds of target accounts that you're looking to penetrate as a B2B company, you may need to spend 6 figures in San Francisco or New York. But for other folks, secondary markets, tertiary markets, where your dollar can go further, that may make more sense. So it really is a fit for everyone now. And that's in a big way, honestly, from how we've approached it. And a lot of marketers are catching on to it. It's awesome.
Yeah, there's so many fun use cases. Like I told you before we started this interview, like I love this topic because there's a lot of B2B marketers who just run the playbooks that they know. And
Sure.
this isn't one of those playbooks. This is different. And so I think this was one of the advantages of owning an agency. And we worked with companies that were B2C. So we got to see different things. I was actually on the board of the Opera, and they asked me, like, what should our ad marketing strategy be? And one of the things we did was we did lamppost banners, right? Because it was a totally different product. And I think this is why my point is like, why all marketers should at some point in their career market something else that's totally
Mm,
different, whether it's a B2C product or sit on a nonprofit board and have to figure that out. Get out of your bubble and
mm.
out of the usual playbook you run, because the cross pollination of ideas, I think, is super powerful. And out of home is a great example of where I think we'd probably all be using it more if it was considered like, oh, yeah, of course, when you're doing top of funnel, this is just part of the mix, just like LinkedIn ads are, right? But we don't think that way.
Getting out of your
I think
comfort zone to force the issue. I had to jump in on that. I just spoke to a marketer yesterday whose entire career was in SaaS, selling software to, I believe, marketers. She now is at for construction or redevelopment housing, like commercial and residential apartments, the siding. So instead of just like wood paneling that kind of doesn't look great and it's not secure, it's like these metal panels, and $20+ million business out of home. It's like
Yeah.
billboards, perfect for our ICP. And it's just very different. But she's had to think outside the box because it's sometimes it's almost like obvious.
It
Um,
is, but we forget because I always
exactly.
like to do this. We forget because we are all human beings, but when we put on our marketing hat, we
We're all
forget we forget that we're people, right? And as a person, I take the subway, I go downtown and I see the banners in my town. I'm in a bar and there's a TV in there that's showing ads. Like we experience this all as people. And what I think is so frustrating is like we somehow or another fail to observe the world when we are in it as humans as opposed to in it as marketers. And so like to me, the best marketers are the ones that are just observant and curious and want to understand how people think and buy and what their lives are like. And if you just pay attention even to your own life and the things that you're seeing and feeling, I think you can get a lot more ideas for the things that you should be doing.
I will give you credit because I'm definitely going to get that hat. I
Somebody
need to
gave this
go.
to me. Isn't it awesome?
I
So I
need
have
to get.
this hat and then, okay, wait, this one's even better. You'll appreciate this. I have this hat.
I'm doing more or less. For folks obviously not seeing the video, Kathleen is wearing right now black hat with white lettering saying, "I'm doing more with less." And the one
This
before
is
that
from a
was
Pavilion member named David Kirkdorfer. He made me both hats, and I have actually gotten a lot of
Boston guy.
mileage out of them. So,
Greg,
phenomenal.
he's a Boston guy. We'll get you guys connected and get everyone some hats.
yeah.
But that's really funny. That's really funny. To wrap it up, you brought up some great points. Like, especially we work with B2C and D2C brands. D2C brands can give some really great ideas to B2B marketers. And I
Mm.
think like you just said, you got to get your head out of maybe what you're doing day to day sometimes, and you'll come up with some really good ideas. And your examples there, that was such a awesome way to get your brand in front of so many of your ICP at inbound. Didn't seem to cost you a lot. Had to work with a couple vendors, which is like the one part of like, how do you figure this out? But in one sense, that was a brand play, but it ended up probably becoming a demand play, because that speaker that talked about it probably led to a couple people going to your site and maybe signing up. Or so, like, it all comes together. But I think all these parts, it seems like more and more of the markers we talk about, all blending together to how you get to a revenue goal, which again, like the types of people we're talking to, and especially Pavilion members, are beholden to revenue goals. And so I
Yeah.
think out of home's a good fit for that. You gave some great examples of how marketers can think outside the box. That's why we call this Beyond the Billboard, because there's other ways to use out of home beyond just billboards. So thanks for educating the
Yeah.
listeners. This was excellent. You bring some incredible thoughts to this. How can people find you? What's the best way for them to find Pavilion and learn more about that, but also yourself?
Sure. You can learn more about Pavilion at joinpavilion.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn and just mention that you connected with me here, and I will definitely accept your connection request.
Awesome.
Phenomenal.
Thanks. Yeah, this was great. Cannot recommend Pavilion enough for those that are
Yeah.
listening. Connect with Kathleen. Awesome ideas. Great voice online, and just you're very helpful. So we appreciate you joining us, and thanks for sharing your ideas here. We appreciate it.
Thank you both for having me.
No problem. This has been another episode of Beyond the Billboard. We love talking to marketers and agency owners. So thanks for sharing your story here, and we're excited to share some more. So hopefully we grab you on the next one that's coming around. Thanks for listening. For Greg and myself, we'll talk to you on the next one. Thanks.